What's up YouTube? Capital G here. So today I want to talk a little bit about Effect Veiler. She's so far out of the loop you probably forgot about her existence completely, right? How could a card go from absolute powerhouse and maybe deciding factor in last year's World Championship Finals to a card that sees less play in the meta than Dp-Ygo and is never mentioned when deck building? Let's examine this in a video that I'm going to call The Rise and Fall of Effect Veiler. Immediate impact. Effect Veiler was released in Duelist Revolution, one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most well-rounded and overall best sets ever, a set that gave us the fairly competitive Scrap archetype, a format-defining new Solemn Trap card, and of course a new Ace card that added consistency to a lot of slower decks in the game and Pot of Duality. But through all of that, Effect Veiler still shined and made her presence felt as she became the bona fide best hand trap in the game, surpassing even the likes of Gore's Emissary of Darkness. Unlike some other hand traps in the game such as Gore, Stragodia, and Dp-Ygo, Veiler was usually a neg-1 when it came to card advantage. However, she made up for it with her ability to shut down devastating boss monsters in the 5D era such as Mistworm and Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Post Storm of Ragnarok, which of course gave us Max C, she was still often considered to be the top dog in the world of hand traps because it was deemed better to simply stop the synchro spam play of most decks in the meta such as Plant Synchro and 3 Gateway 6 Samurai than to draw an infinite amount of cards and possibly die right then and there. Using Veiler against a Kageki or a Lone Fire Blossom that was attempting to tribute Dandelion could easily shut down your opponent's play and gave you the opportunity to launch a counterattack against their subpar board. Still a star. Similarly, a good chunk of the Zexal era favored Effect Veiler quite nicely, and you could even argue that she got even stronger. This was because of one very important factor: the removal of ignition priority from the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Before that, things like Lone Fire Blossom and Rescue Rabbit could tribute themselves off field before Veiler ever had the opportunity to negate their effects. Not only would they fall victim to her effect now, but these monsters generally had terrible stats and would leave your opponent in a very tumultuous situation. It also seemed in the Zexal era that Konami started making the game much more focused around archetypes, and usually these archetypes had starter monsters that they always wanted to summon first to get things rolling. Think of monsters like Spellbook Magician of Prophecy or Madoche Mageline. Stopping your opponent from getting set up early usually set them back a turn and just disrupted their playstyle completely. This was also the one era where Veiler being light attribute actually had a lot of relevance. When Chaos Dragons rose to their Tier 1 YCS winning status, Veiler was not only used in the deck as an excellent line of defense, but because she was light, she could be banished from the graveyard to summon powerful Chaos monsters. Lastly, Effect Veiler also really shined in matchups against decks that specialize in picking your field apart without relying on special summoning crazy all over the board. Fire Fist and Insectors definitely meet that criteria, and having a Veiler at the right time could mean the difference between winning or losing against those archetypes. Where it all came crashing down. The Arc V era was Effect Veiler's absolute worst nightmare. Not only one where we had a lot of archetypes that weren't completely reliant on their normal summon that triggered effects to search out other monsters, but we had multiple archetypes that were completely immune to targeting as a whole. When the Duelist Alliance era started, Effect Veiler was in a pretty rough spot. Burning Abyss, Shadows, and Yang Xing were all graveyard based and would get their effects in the graveyard, leaving her really only Serteller Knights as a deck to capitalize on. Moving forward, the pendulum archetypes like Cleafort and Performapals made the situation even worse. All Cleafort monsters were immune to her effect negation because she was a mere level 1 monster, and even though she should have been able to take full advantage of stopping Joker at least, that didn't really do much against Performapals when Monkey Board was at 3 and that could just search them the card that they may have wanted to get with Joker anyways. It was at this point that Effect Veiler's competitive play all but died, as she just wouldn't have enough of an impact against the vast meta pool. But what really cemented Effect Veiler's death was the release of Dimension of Chaos. This set released the entire Magispector archetype that laughed at targeting, as well as Cosmos' true boss monster and Dark Destroyer, which basically did the same thing. A shocking rebound. While Effect Veiler had been completely out of the meta for a good bit, she did make a stunning brief return because of the Blue Eyes support and Shining Victories around May 2016. Sageify's of Blue made her searchable, and considering Blue Eyes wasn't a deck that had a lot of good natural ways to defend itself, players usually opted to run 2 copies of Veiler just in case. This was best showcased in the 2016 Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship, where both the first place and runner-up deck list ran multiple copies of Veiler. The problem was, of course, Worlds isn't an actual good representation of either the TCG or the OCG metagames because it's a combination ban list that only exists for a weekend. Send in the replacements. While Effect Veiler shined for a few months in the spotlight because of Blue Eyes, we all knew that this wasn't going to last very long. The eventual reality, however, was much more cruel and ended up being just another trip to irrelevance. Over the next year, Konami would produce newer hand traps that would largely power creep our girl. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbits, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs, and possibly another one coming in Flames of Destruction, the set after Extreme Force. These new hand traps completely outshined Veiler in almost every way. Not only could 2 of them affect spells and traps, which Effect Veiler could not do, but they actually had stat lines, which meant that you could conceivably put them on the field for a turn and maybe even keep your opponent at bay, yet something else that Effect Veiler had no hope of ever doing. Worst of all, they stripped Effect Veiler of her one defining trait that she generally had over almost every hand trap, the fact that she was a tuner. The lollies could be used for synchro summons as well, and being level 3 is generally way better than level 1 because the XP pool is so much deeper and stronger, especially when you combine that with the fact that Burning Abyss just seemed to roam around the meta forever. Last breath. Is it possible that Veiler could make a dominant return to the meta as one of the most played hand traps in the game? Anything is technically possible, but I would personally bet against it. Spiral are just another deck to be added to the list. You know that list of I can't play Veiler against this deck because the 2 resort cards make it so you can't target the archetype, and at that point, what exactly are you really using Veiler for? On top of that, when you think of the fact that she can only affect monsters, I'm just not sure that that actually does enough in the game anymore. There's something like Winter Cherries. Yeah, Winter Cherries only affects monsters, but Winter Cherries can take away the win conditions of decks like Burning Abyss and ABC. They don't have their boss monsters, they're definitely going to struggle. Veiler can't do anything nearly as impactful, even in matchups where Veiler should absolutely shine, like Trickstar and Invoked, because these are decks that want to summon one monster turn 1 every game. Ash Blossom does the same thing. It can shut down those cards, but it can shut down a bunch of other cards like Terraforming and Pot of Desires and a whole bunch of other searching cards as well. So she kind of gets outclassed in matchups where she should be dominant in. So I don't know. Maybe somehow, some way she'll find it back into the meta. I guess only time will tell. So let me know what you guys thought of this video and I guess the concept of this series as a whole. I like to think of these educational videos for newer players as, you know, my own little personal duel academy, and I guess that makes me Dr. Crowler. Anyways, whatever you guys think, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching as always. Subscribe if you have not already and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.